Canyon de Chelly invites a certain kind of question. The walls are high enough to hide an alcove from the road. Ancient rooms cling to sandstone ledges. Cottonwoods follow the water on the canyon floor, while the land above them looks dry and exposed. From an overlook, it is easy to think that the real story must be somewhere behind the visible one. What did the Navajo say was hidden inside Canyon de Chelly? The public record offers a better answer. The most important thing inside the canyon is not hidden at all. It is a living Dine community, a long sequence of human histories, and a landscape managed through a partnership between the Navajo Nation and the National Park Service. Canyon de Chelly is unlike most places in the national park system. All of the land within the monument is Navajo Tribal Trust land. Dine families live in the canyon, raise livestock, grow crops, and maintain homes in a place they called Segi, meaning within the rocks. The park does not contain an empty pass surrounded by modern visitors. It contains a community whose daily life continues beneath the same sandstone walls that draw people from around the world. That fact changes the meaning of hidden. In many mystery stories, hidden means sealed away. A lost room, a forbidden object, a secret civilization. At Canyon de Chelly, the more meaningful history is often visible from the rim if you know what you are looking at. A field is not merely a patch of green. It is evidence that water, soil, labor, and family life still matter in the canyon. A hogan is not background scenery. It is a home in a living landscape. A cliff dwelling is not proof that the canyon stopped in the past. It is one layer in a place where people have lived for nearly 5,000 years. The National Park Service describes Canyon de Chelly as one of the longest continuously inhabited landscapes in North America. That continuity is not simple. Different peoples lived, farmed, traveled, and built here at different times. Ancient Puebloan communities created homes and fields in the canyon. Hopi people later planted corn and orchards there before establishing permanent homes on mesas to the west. Dine people settled the southwest between the four sacred mountains and continued to raise families and plant crops in and around Segi. Those histories belong beside one another. They should not be collapsed into one anonymous legend. The canyon's ancient architecture is real and remarkable. White House Ruin, visible from the trail and overlook that share its name, was built in a sandstone alcove and occupied during the ancestral Puebloan period. Mummy Cave contains the remains of a larger cliff dwelling with many rooms high above the canyon floor. Rock writings, pottery, tools, and walls record generations of work. But the ruins do not explain every part of the canyon by themselves. They do not cancel the histories of the people who came later, and they do not become a secret code simply because some rooms are difficult to reach. The canyon's public interpretation is careful for a reason. Certain sites are protected. Much of the canyon floor is accessed with an authorized Navajo guide. The rules are not there to make a visitor feel excluded from a mystery. They exist because cultural resources, homes, farms, sacred places, and private life cannot survive if every visitor treats the landscape as an open set for discovery. There are roughly 40 families residing within the monument boundaries, according to the Park Service. That number makes it impossible to tell the canyon honestly as an abandoned world. A camera may find a silent cliff wall, but beyond the frame are people tending animals, moving through the canyon and carrying responsibilities that do not appear in an archaeological caption. The first question, then, is not what is hidden in a cave. It is what a visitor fails to see when looking only for a cave. The answer begins with the ground beneath the cliffs, water, soil, homes, and a history that has never belonged to one era alone. Long before Canyon de Chelly became a national monument, people understood the value of its protected floor. The high sandstone walls created shelter. Water moved through the canyon. Cottonwoods offered shade. Soil near the washes could support crops. In a region where dry land can make every planting season uncertain, those conditions mattered. The earliest known communities in the canyon used it for campsites, shelters, and permanent homes. Over centuries, architecture changed. Pit houses gave way to more substantial dwellings. Families built in alcoves where sunlight and natural protection made life easier. The remains now called cliff dwellings were not built for a future audience. They were homes inside a practical landscape. The ancestral Puebloan period left some of the canyon's most visible architecture. White House Ruin, with its lower and upper dwellings, stands within a high alcove. The white plaster that once covered part of its back wall gave the site its modern English name. Mummy Cave, higher on the cliff, preserves another large complex. These structures show planning, masonry, farming, storage, and social life. They also show why a canyon can hold many stories at once. A home can become an archaeological site, an overlook, a protected resource, and a point of connection for descendants. The people who built these places were not lost. The National Park Service describes them as predecessors of today's Pueblo and Hopi peoples. The word Anasazi appears in older park materials as a Navajo term commonly translated as ancient ones, but the broader term ancestral Puebloans better recognizes the living descendant communities connected to this history. That correction matters at Canyon de Chelly as much as it did at Chaco. A cliff dwelling can look empty because its original residents moved long ago. But absence from one room is not disappearance from history. Families migrated, farming conditions changed, and communities established new homes. Descendant traditions remain part of the region's cultural map. The Hopi connection is one of the canyon's visible historical layers. Public Park Service history explains that Hopi people migrated into the canyons, planted cornfields and peach orchards, and later settled permanently on mesas to the west. The Hopi connection is not evidence that every site is Hopi, just as the Dine connection is not evidence that every cliff dwelling was Navajo. The canyon asks for precision. Precision is what keeps a compelling story from becoming a false one. The next major layer is Dine life. The Navajo, or Dine, settled the southwest and made homes between the four sacred mountains. At Canyon de Chelly, they did not arrive to inherit a museum. They lived in a landscape of water, fields, rock walls, roots, and older sites. They raised families, farmed, kept livestock, and gave the canyon a name, Tsegi, within the rocks. That name is not a riddle. It is a description of place, yet it also tells us something about perspective. From outside, the canyon can look like a narrow cut in a vast plateau. From within, it is a world of walls, shade, water, farms, and roots. The difference between those views explains why a visitor's question about hidden things can miss what is already present. One of the most famous landmarks in the monument is Spider Rock, a tall sandstone spire rising from the canyon floor. The Park Service's public interpretation connects it with Spider Woman, who taught the Navajo people how to weave. This is a public cultural reference, not an invitation to recreate a private ceremony or turn a sacred teaching into a horror scene. It shows how a physical feature can carry cultural meaning without becoming a clue to a secret chamber. Weaving offers a useful comparison. A finished textile can look like a single image from a distance. Up close, it is made of many threads held in relation to one another. Canyon de Chelly is like that. Ancient Puebloan architecture, Hopi history, Dine homes, farms, stories, rock writings, modern management and visitor routes are distinct threads. Pull one out and call it the whole pattern, and the picture weakens. The question now becomes more specific. How did the canyon remain a living dinner place while becoming a national monument designed to preserve its past? The answer is not hidden behind the cliffs. It is written into the unusual way the park is managed. In 1931, Canyon de Chelly National Monument was authorized to preserve important archaeological resources. The decision recognized more than 4,000 years of human occupation and the extraordinary remains inside the canyon walls. But the monument was not created on empty federal land. It was created entirely within Navajo tribal trust land. That arrangement makes Canyon de Chelly different from the version of a national park many visitors expect. The National Park Service manages the monument in partnership with the Navajo Nation. The Navajo Nation retains jurisdiction over many activities on the land. Dine families remain in the canyon. Their farms and homes are not exhibits. They are part of the condition that makes the place what it is. This is why access has limits. Visitors can see the canyon from rim overlooks. The White House Trail is a public route that leads toward one of the best-known cliff dwellings. But much of the canyon floor requires an authorized Navajo guide. The policy is practical as well as cultural. The canyon contains private residences, farms, fragile archaeological sites, and places whose meaning cannot be protected if they are treated as open scenery. For someone looking for a mystery, a guide requirement can sound like an invitation to speculate. It should mean the opposite. A guide does not prove a secret. It recognizes that the land has people who know its roots, rules, weather, homes, and responsibilities better than a visitor with a map. The same principle applies to drones, unauthorized trails, and objects left in the canyon. Park and Navajo Nation rules protect resources and privacy. The monument's public policies even include a direct request not to desecrate Navajo lands by scattering cremated remains on tribal property. These are not dramatic details, but they reveal the central fact of the canyon. This is not a backdrop. It is a homeland. The word homeland is easy to say and difficult to absorb. It means a landscape does not become neutral because a visitor can photograph it. It means a rock formation may be a landmark but also part of a teaching. It means a canyon floor may hold an ancient site, but also a field someone tends this season. It means a wall with rock writings is not a blank surface for a stranger's interpretation. This is where the public story of Canyon de Chelly becomes stronger than the hidden secret version. The canyon openly shows the relationship between preservation and life. Ancient architecture is protected beside living farms. A national agency works with the tribal government rather than replacing it. Visitor access is organized around the fact that people remain here. That does not mean every question has a public answer. Some places are sacred. Some knowledge is not meant for visitors, cameras, or a documentary script. The right response is not to fill the silence with an invented artifact or a whispered prophecy. The right response is to state the limit and explain why it exists. The public history of the canyon already offers enough drama. Imagine a family planting beneath cliffs that have held homes for 1,000 years. Imagine cottonwoods marking water in a dry region. Imagine a guide moving through a landscape where a turn in the canyon can lead past a farm, a rock writing, a cliff dwelling, or a place that visitors are asked not to disturb. The story is not that nobody knows what is inside. The story is that the canyon has never stopped being inhabited by meaning. There is also a practical lesson in the monument's management. Preservation is not only about putting a rope around a ruin, it is about protecting water, soil, privacy, heritage, wildlife, trails, and the ability of a community to continue living where its history is rooted. An archaeological site can be damaged in an afternoon. A photograph can spread a sensitive location in seconds. A careless visitor can turn a protected place into a problem for people who must stay after the visitor leaves. The Dine history revealed inside Canyon de Chelly is therefore not a single object in a hidden room. It is a relationship visible in the daily structure of the place. Tribal trust land, shared management, family farms, guided access, public stories, and protected boundaries. The final part of the story returns to the rim. From there, the canyon may still look like a place of unanswered questions. But the evidence has changed what those questions should be. What is hidden inside Canyon de Chelly? The public record gives a clear answer. There are ancient homes in sandstone alcoves, rock writings, fields, tools, watercourses, and archaeological traces of people who lived here across thousands of years. There are public stories connected to spider rock and weaving. There are families who still live and farm in Segi. There are protected places whose details do not belong in a visitor's search for a secret. The canyon is not empty. It is not frozen, and it is not waiting for an outsider to discover what the Dine already know. The strongest story is the continuity itself. Ancient Puebloan families built homes where the canyon gave them shelter and sun. Hopi history remains part of the landscape. Dine families made the canyon a living homeland, raising livestock, planting crops, maintaining homes, and carrying public cultural connections forward. The Navajo Nation and the National Park Service now manage the monument together because neither archaeology nor scenery alone explains what needs protection. That partnership is one of the most important things visible inside the canyon. It tells us that preservation is not a process of removing people from history. At its best, it is a way of protecting a living relationship between people and place. The word hidden can still be useful if we use it carefully. Some things are hidden by distance. A farm may be invisible from an overlook. A spring may be hidden behind cottonwoods. A cliff dwelling may only appear when the canyon bends. Other things are hidden because they are protected, private, or sacred. The difference is important. The first kind of hiddenness invites patient observation. The second demands respect. No secret chamber is needed to make Canyon de Chelly compelling. Stand at the rim and look toward the green strips on the floor. Look at the sandstone walls, the old rooms, the roots cut by water, and the homes that remain. The history is not buried beneath the canyon. It is layered across it. That is what Dine history reveals inside Canyon de Chelly, a homeland that contains ancient architecture without becoming ancient only, public traditions without becoming public property, and living families without becoming scenery. If this changed the way you see Canyon de Chelly, consider subscribing to Navajo Echoes, and if there is another public Dine landscape or historical question you would like explored with the same care, leave it in the comments. There is another reason the phrase "hidden inside" can mislead us. It encourages a visitor to imagine the canyon as a container, a dramatic landscape with one final object waiting at its center. Canyon de Chelly does not work that way. Its meaning is spread across distance, season, memory, work, and responsibility. Take the canyon floor. From the rim, a field can look like a small patch of green beside a road or a wash. Up close, it is evidence that water, soil, weather, labor, family knowledge, and permission to remain have all met in one place. A peach tree is not simply a picturesque remnant. It points to orchards, care, and time. A corral is not a prop from an older frontier story. It is part of a working homeland. That perspective changes how we look at ruins as well. The sandstone rooms at White House are often the first ancient structures visitors notice. Their pale walls stand beneath an alcove, and their setting makes it easy to turn them into a scene from a vanished world. But the public history of the monument asks for a more careful reading. The structures belong to the long presence of ancestral Puebloan communities. Their descendants have not vanished from the southwest. Pueblo peoples and Hopi people maintain living relationships, histories, and cultural responsibilities connected to this wider region. Calling every old structure a lost city makes a simple promise, that the past can be possessed by whoever arrives last. The actual story is more demanding. It requires us to hold several truths together. A place can be archaeologically ancient and culturally present. It can contain material evidence that researchers study while also carrying meanings that do not become public just because a camera can reach the rim. It can be beautiful without being available for every kind of curiosity. Public information about the monument describes a cultural landscape formed by many eras. It identifies ancient occupation, later Pueblo and Hopi connections, and the long Dine presence that continues today. That sequence should not be treated as a ladder in which one people replaces another and erases them. It is better understood as a landscape with overlapping histories. The canyon has been home, refuge, route, farming ground, ceremonial setting, and historical record for different communities across time. One of the most memorable public traditions associated with the monument is Spider Rock. The sandstone spire rises above the canyon floor and is visible from overlooks. National Park Service interpretation shares that Spider Woman, a sacred figure in Dine tradition, taught Navajo women how to weave. The lesson for a responsible storyteller is not to inflate that public account into a catalogue of secret teachings. It is to let a public tradition remain what it is, a meaningful connection between a landmark, a people, and an art that continues to live. Weaving provides a useful contrast to the fantasy of a hidden artifact. An artifact is often imagined as an isolated object, valuable because someone can remove it and display it. A woven textile comes from a living practice. It involves materials, skill, design, family learning, trade, and time. The story is not concealed inside one object. It exists in the continuity of making. The same is true of the canyon's archaeological record. A wall fragment, a potsherd, a petroglyph, or an old field boundary may be visually striking. Yet each gains meaning from context. Who made it? When was it used? What other evidence lies nearby? What public interpretation is available? What should remain undisturbed? Removing an object or treating it as a clue to treasure destroys the relationships that make it understandable. So when we ask what is inside Canyon de Chelly, we should not picture a locked door at the end of a tunnel. We should picture a landscape where the answer changes with the question. An archaeologist may see a sequence of occupation. A farmer may see soil and water. A Dine family may see home. A visitor may see a view. None of those perspectives gives permission to cancel the others. The canyon's deepest challenge is not to find the one thing nobody else has seen. It is to learn to see what has been in plain sight. Continuity, stewardship, and the limits of an outsider's claim. Those limits are not a weakness in the story. They are one reason Canyon de Chelly remains different from a conventional archaeological park. The monument is located on Navajo Nation land. The Navajo Nation retains jurisdiction, and access rules reflect the fact that the canyon is also a place where people live. Outside the designated self-guided White House Trail, visitors generally need an authorized Navajo guide to enter the canyon. That rule is sometimes described as an obstacle, as though the canyon were withholding its real self from the public. In fact, it clarifies the terms of a visit. A living homeland is not a film set. Private homes are not museum exhibits. Fields are not open scenery. Sacred places do not become less sacred because they appear on a map. The guide requirement makes visible a principle that should apply everywhere. Access is a relationship, not an entitlement. The National Park Service and the Navajo Nation manage Canyon de Chelly through a partnership that reflects this unusual reality. The monument protects historic and natural resources, but the landscape is not separated from the community that lives there. This arrangement does not erase the hard history of federal involvement in native lands, nor does it solve every tension between preservation, tourism, and daily life. It does, however, recognize that management cannot be honest if it pretends the people of Tsegi are absent. That is why the most accurate visual image of Canyon de Chelly is not a dark cave entrance or a glowing object in a sealed room. It is a wide daylight view, sandstone walls, a road or wash, green fields, cottonwoods, a livestock, homes, and the long shadows of cliffs. The scene contains more history than a fabricated secret ever could. There are, of course, real mysteries in the scholarly sense. Archaeologists continue to ask how communities adapted to changing climate, water, trade, population, and conflict across centuries. Researchers refine dates, compare evidence, and debate interpretation. Those are honest mysteries because they begin with evidence and remain open about uncertainty. They do not need to borrow authority from unnamed elders or claim that silence proves a hidden underground truth. For viewers drawn to the title's promise, that distinction matters. A story can be suspenseful without pretending that public indigenous history is a code to be cracked. The canyon gives us a stronger kind of suspense. Thousands of years of human choices, traces that survive unevenly, and living families whose relationship to the place continues in the present tense. The next time a dramatic title tells you that something is hidden inside Canyon de Chelly, ask a few simple questions. Is the claim supported by a named source? Does it distinguish Dine history from the histories of Pueblo and Hopi peoples? Does it recognize that people live in the canyon now? Does it treat access restrictions as respect rather than proof of a cover-up? And does it leave room for knowledge that is not ours to demand? Those questions do not make the canyon less mysterious. They make it more real. The real discovery in Tsegi is not a secret object. It is the realization that history can remain alive without becoming available for extraction. The canyon holds ancient homes, public teachings, cultivated ground, protected places, and present-day families. It holds evidence that can be studied and relationships that must be respected. That is what Dine history reveals inside Canyon de Chelly. And perhaps that is the better invitation, not to enter looking for what can be taken from the canyon, but to leave understanding why so much of it must remain in place.